Greetings, ladies and gentlemen, it is I am the one and only, Mexi here once again, and I am back for the likes of the Mexi Toys videos. And ladies and gentlemen, welcome back for some more of Let's Play of Kirby and the Forgotten Land, not only for the Nintendo Switch 1, but in addition to the latest release on the Nintendo Switch 2, thanks to the forms of the Star-Crossed World expansion adventure, or story I should say. So, last time, we somehow managed able to go back into the previous 8 story levels so far, to able to actually gather some more Starries, although despite the fact that we are off by one more Starry in one of the levels in World 3 in terms of story levels, but apart from those side things though, hopefully we'll be back into that once we're able to actually go into another set of revisits for the sake of the forms of certain story levels. So yeah, today for this video is that, speaking of which though, is about the fact that exponentially speaking though, we can able to actually miraculously try to collect the last batch of those stories, and as a result, like I said before, since on Friday, this particular part is also going to be post-commentary, because there's nothing else I can really say about this process right there. Well, apart from the fact that, well, for those of you probably wondering, yes, today is the forms of the 29th of September today, in some cases in 2025 today, and recently though, for the fact that no matter what though, Mega Man is finally back, or so you think. Because not only we can able to get ourselves a yet another compilation game, well, it's not going to be specifically until next year, in 2026, but also for the fact that, well, the rumors are true, for the sake of the forms of the final DLC has been confirmed for Sonic Racing Crossed Worlds, and that, ladies and gentlemen, for the fact that Mega Man is now going to be joining in a Sonic Racing game, alongside with Pac-Man, SpongeBob, and among all others as well, including Steve as well from Minecraft. So as a result though, it's actually very awesome to me, especially considering about the fact that obviously though, in addition about the fact that we somehow got Mega Man as a playable character in Sonic Racing Crossed Worlds, but in addition to that, Proto Man is also going to be added too. And I was like, oh snap, this is awesome. Especially because both Mega Man and Proto Man, specifically, not only Mega Man 9, but in addition to Mega Man 10 as playable characters, are both really awesome. Especially because not only for the fact that, well, it has been a very long time since we actually last heard about anything in terms of Mega Man related. Well, the last time we actually got something Mega Man related was back in 2023, I think it was. In terms of the forms of Mega Man Battle Network Legacy Collections 1 and 2. And speaking of which, though, is about the fact that the next Legacy Collection they did manage to bring in, or specifically has been announced since quite some time actually, and that's what it appears to be. Mega Man Star Force Legacy Collection. So because of that, they are all basically released originally on the Nintendo DS, and they decided able to bring those games back, but this time around though on modern hardware, or specifically modern systems, ranging from, well, as be expected, PlayStation 4, PlayStation 5, Xbox One, I think is what it says, alongside with the forms of Xbox Series X/S, PC Steam, and of course the Nintendo Switch. But sadly no Nintendo Switch 2 for some odd reason. And obviously, like I said before, for the fact that that particular compilation, Mega Man Star Force Legacy Collection, is not going to be releasing and during that some time in 2026. So as a result, in terms of the games library they somehow bring in, those what appears to be not only 3 versions of Mega Man Star Force 1, but in addition to not 1 but 2 versions of Mega Man Star Force 2 and Star Force 3 respectively. So as a result, for those games themselves, we're obviously going to be getting Mega Man Star Force Pegasus, and in addition to Leo and Dragon versions. And then when it comes to Star Force 2, we can able to expect to get Zika X Ninja, and in addition to Zika X Saran, I think is what it says anyway. And then finally, most notably though, when it comes to Star Force 3, we can able to expect to get not only Black Ace, but in addition to Red Joker versions. So yeah, I guess that's all there is to say about this, I guess. And while looking at the forms of both Mega Man and Proto Man, decided able to join in Sonic Racing Crossed Worlds, they are very, very cool looking. Although, it still is kind of unfortunate for the fact there's still no voice clips to be added, just like the forms of how it does on any other DLC characters, not only for the sake of the forms of Steve and Alex and even Creeper especially, but in addition to that though with SpongeBob and Patrick, and let's not forget ourselves with not only 4 ghosts, but also Pac-Man as well. So, no surprise there. Although, I guess silent character like Mega Man kind of makes a little bit sense, because obviously though, ever since not only Super Smash Bros. For the 3DS, but in addition to the Wii U and Super Smash Bros. Ultimate, that Mega Man does not speak at all, alongside with the forms of Pac-Man as well. So, as a result though, yeah, it does look pretty awesome to see, not only with Sonic, but in addition to Pac-Man and Mega Man, all in one particular racing game, because the last time they somehow joined in together was, well, surprisingly enough, both Super Smash Bros. For the 3DS and Wii U, as well as Super Smash Bros. Ultimate. So because of that, yeah, I'm very excited about this for the most part, especially considering about the fact that I'm guessing for the fact that that particular DLC is not going to be arriving until also in 2026, but I'll explain more details about that if we somehow manage able to keep on going back into the exact same levels again, during the forms of the Starry levels basically. So, relatively speaking though, the racetrack has also been revealed for the sake of the forms of the Mega Man DLC pack, and as a result, the racetrack they're going to be added in is actually going to be based off from the legendary Mega Man 2, obviously, for the sake of the forms of the Wily's Castle racetrack. And I'm going to say, it does look pretty awesome too, especially not only we are able to actually get a chance to see Dr. Wily with the forms of Wily Machine 2 based off of Mega Man 2, but in addition to that, the godforsaken Yellow Devil is back, and as a result, he becomes like a stage hazard. So because of that though, yeah, I'm really looking forward to this though, especially because similar to the forms of how it does it for Pac-Man DLC, and fortunately though, for the fact that I just recently did manage able to purchase the Season Pass on the Switch 1 version of Sonic Racing Cross Worlds, so hopefully though, if we get around on doing our Let's Play of Sonic Racing Cross Worlds until specifically next year for 2026, similar to the forms of how it does it on Mario Kart World, because obviously though we had to wait until specifically not only DLC is about to be arriving, but in addition to try to show off some plentiful of content, so yeah, you get the idea about that. So, and on the subject for that matter though, let's discuss upon the forms of a bunch of announcements they did somehow bring, and it's all thanks to the forms of the latest State of Play PlayStation Direct. So, first of all, they did manage to bring out Sorrows is going to be coming onto PlayStation 5, and as a result, that game is now confirmed the release date for it, and it's about to be coming out at some point in March 20th in 2026. So, I'm guessing the majority of any other games for that matter is going to be coming out until next year in 2026, basically. So, but anyway, the next game they did revealed, and that's what appears to be Zero Paradises for Dead Spies, which I'm not exactly sure how do I explain about this per se, but I do know for certain for one thing it's also going to be coming until 2026 as well. But I don't know when exactly though, but I'm sure enough that we'll find out more about it and during whenever we get into 2026. So, anyway, the next game they did revealed, which appears to be the strangest one out of them all though, Microsoft Flight Simulator 2024. And I was like, we've already been through 2024, haven't we? Well, here's the thing though, because I guess I get the strong feeling for the fact that it was originally released on Xbox, right? Because it did say Microsoft as the actual title itself, right? Well, it turns out for the fact that it's now going to be coming onto PlayStation 5. So as a result, and I'm pretty sure it's going to be releasing until at some point in the 8th of December in 2025. So that's roughly about 4 days after, or 4 days, yeah, I would say it's like 4 days after Metroid Prime 4 Beyond for Nintendo Switch / Nintendo Switch 2. So yeah, that seems rather odd, doesn't it? And meanwhile though, there's also going to be the PlayStation VR 2 support is going to be in development. So yeah, I guess that's something. And next up we have is Battlefield 6, which is not going to be that far until when the game itself is going to be releasing, until the 10th of October in 2025. So, as we expected, it's going to be on next generation of systems, basically. And next up we have is a remaster, which appears to be Deus or Deus EX remastered, I think is what it says anyway, for considering to try to able to celebrate the, I would say the 25th anniversary or something like that. I mean, mind you, I do not know that much of that particular series, I have to be quite frank here, but either way, it is rather interesting about the fact that the DSEX is actually going to be getting a remastered treatment for not only for PlayStation 5, and probably other modern systems as well, I suppose. So, but either way, though, I can't really commented on that too much. So, but anyway, and relatively speaking, I was about the fact that, speaking of the PlayStation 5 though, it'll obviously try to bring in some new features onto that particular remaster, such as, of course, enhanced visuals and overworld controls, and also haptic feedback for the sake of the forms of the actual DualSense controllers, I guess. So, anyway, when it comes to that particular remastered version of DXEX, I think is what it says anyway, that obviously though is going to be releasing and joining at some point on the 5th of February in 2026, in just about, roughly about, a week before Mario Tennis Fever that's going to be releasing on Nintendo Switch 2. So, anyway, so next up we have is Halloween the Game. Yeah, I'm not joking when I'm saying this, it's literally going to be Halloween the Game is going to be coming. And what's even more bizarrely enough is that it's going to be releasing at some point in next year, despite the fact that Halloween is getting very close in the forms of in 2025, that is. So, I digress. So, as we expected, it's going to be on PlayStation 5 for sure, and that's going to be coming out until the 8th of September in 2026. So, and there's also going to be the, let's say the DLC expansion or something like that, which appears to be, I'm not entirely sure what that game itself is called, by the way, but I do know for certain, for one thing, it's going to be getting the, a DLC or something like that, which appears to be Last, Approach, and, well, I can't really pronounce that particular title's name, by the way, which I do apologize for that, about that. And that game is going to be on, in development for PlayStation 5, so. And next up we have is 7 Deadly Sins Origin, and as far as I'm aware, it's going to be coming out at some point on January 28th in 2026 for the PlayStation 5 and maybe other platforms as well, I suppose. So, and while on the subject when it comes to Sonic Racing Cross Worlds, yes, they somehow already mentioned about the forms of Sonic Racing Cross Worlds to added in Mega Man DLC pack, which I found was actually pretty cool, for the fact that when it comes to Mega Man's kart, is actually based off from Rush, which as a result, it does look pretty cool, I'm not gonna lie. I mean, I can imagine about the fact that if Rush were able to actually become an extreme gear, because after all, in Mega Man 3, all the way up to Mega Man 11, obviously though that Mega Man does utilize Rush Jet, so as a result though, it allows you to able to bypass several hazards, including bottomless pits, and you get the idea for that point. So yeah, I could imagine if that's gonna be the case. Well, let's wait and see what happens and join at some point in next year, like I said before, because it did say it's going to be in next year for sure, alongside with Pac-Man, of course. So, but still, I'm really looking forward to trying out those particular DLC racetracks for Sonic Racing Cross Worlds, and suffice to say though, that we are basically done when it comes to the forms of Season Pass DLC characters. The only thing is left now is, of course, free DLC characters by free update system, which, can you see what this is going? Which is basically, it's like the equivalent to the forms of not only Sonic Frontiers' free DLC roadmap system, but in addition to that, the most infamous thing out of them all though, when it comes to some examples being the majority of the Mario sports games on Nintendo Switch, basically, like, you know, Mario Tennis Aces, Mario Golf Super Rush, and of course, the infamous one out of them all though, Mario Strikers Battle League Football, which as a result, why did they manage to able to continue with that particular stupid free update system, by the way? Which, obviously though, it might actually start to lose interest with the forms of trying to able to experience the game or something like that. So yeah, it's rather sad honestly, but either way. let's continue things on when it comes to the forms of some more announcements they did bring for the sake of the most recent State of Play Direct, and that's what it appears to be for the fact that next up they somehow showcase the forms of Neo 3, which as a result is going to be on PlayStation 5 for sure, alongside with the forms of maybe Xbox Series X as well. So yeah, relatively speaking of, that game is going to be releasing until the 6th of February in 2026. So, and next up we have is yet another remaster, but this time what appears to be the most popular game at the time since on the PlayStation 2 era, which that's what appears to be Dynasty Warriors 3 Complete Edition Remastered, which, yeah, it seems pretty interesting, and as far as I'm aware, that game is going to be releasing until 2026, specifically March 19th. So, but that doesn't stop there, because that game is also going to be releasing on not only for the Xbox systems, but in addition to that, out of nowhere, there's also Nintendo Switch 1 as well as Nintendo Switch 2 as well. So because of that though, while I wouldn't expect a surprise about the fact that the Switch 1 version will run quite poorly once that particular version comes out, and I can imagine about the fact that I get the horrible feeling that Dynasty Warriors 3 Complete Edition Remaster is going to be yet another one of those stupid game keycard releases for Nintendo Switch 2, which, still, I'm so sick of the forms of, you know, the stupid game keycard system, which is pretty much infamous as it stands, especially able to actually give a lot of third-party supportive releases for Nintendo Switch 2 a huge disadvantage, because unlike Switch 1, it does have huge advantage despite what the forms of underperformed specs or anything else like that. Well, that's besides the point. So, anyway though, the next game they did revealed, which appears to be Code Vein 2, which as a result, that game is also going to be coming out until 2026, specifically 30th of January. So, yeah, that's short something. And the next game they talked about, which appears to be Final Fantasy Tactics, the Ezreal Chronicles, I think is what it says. So as a result though, expecting that game is going to be releasing until tomorrow, on the 30th of September in this year, so that's something. Next up, what appears to be by the forms of Let It Die Inferno, and that's going to be coming onto PlayStation 5 as well. So as a result, it's going to be releasing until December the 3rd in 2025. So that's roughly about a day before Metroid Prime 4 Beyond for Nintendo Switch and Nintendo Switch 2 is releasing during that time. So yeah, it's going to be quite a lot of close releases between the forms of any other games for that matter, which is pretty crazy, kind of think about it. So, anyway, next up we have is the forms of Chrono Script, The Endless End, which, as a result, that game is also going to be coming out until 2026. Well, I will say the art style looks very, very cool, especially it almost reminds me like a book aesthetics and all that stuff, which, either way though, I can't really comment on it too much. So anyway, next up we have is yet another game is also going to be coming until 2026, and that's what appears to be Crimson Desert. So as a result, that game is going to be on PlayStation 5 of course, and it's expected to be releasing until the March 19th in 2026. So yeah, I guess it's that. And next up we have is another set of peripherals that we're expecting to see, and that's what appears to be Pulse Elevate wireless speakers. So as a result, it comes with two different colors within both black and white, and as a result, those peripherals are going to be available until sometime in 2026. So yeah, I got nothing else to say about this, I guess. So, and next up we have is the some classic games will be added into for specifically PlayStation Plus subscription. So as a result, first of all, in terms of the forms of monthly games, as far as I'm aware, until on the 7th of October in this year in 2025, they're going to be bringing in not only Goat Simulator 3, but in addition to Cocoon, I think is what it says anyway, in addition to Alan Wake 2, and on top of that, also during the informs around a couple of days back, that I don't suppose you noticed, that obviously though, there's actually The Last of Us Day, which I'm not exactly sure what that stands exactly, although let me know in the comments down below, but even then, The Last of Us Part 2 Remastered is going to be coming onto the game catalog when it comes to PlayStation Plus. So as a result, yeah, it already came out just recently. So, and meanwhile, there's also Classics catalog, which I'm generally surprised about in terms of not only they added in one or two fighting games in particular, but in addition to that though, the third game on the actual catalog as well. So those games are Tekken 3, and in addition to Soul Calibur 3, that Tekken 3 did originally came out on the PlayStation 1, and then when it comes to Soul Calibur 3, it's only on PlayStation 2. So yeah, that's actually pretty cool to see the classic games have been added, and is especially noticeable considering about the fact that, well, obviously though, I was generally surprised about the fact that when it comes to Nintendo Switch 2 actually, they only got Soul Calibur 2, whilst the PlayStation Plus category for the actual classic catalog hasn't been added Soul Calibur 2 yet, which maybe they'll add it in the near future. I highly doubt it, but regardless of such though, it's about the fact that it's nice able to have Soul Calibur 3 has been re-released for the very first time, I suppose. So anyway, and there's also Lara Croft Tomb Raider Anniversary has also been added as well. Well, mind you, it's going to be saying coming soon, so I really can't guarantee it's going to be releasing for this year or next year specifically for 2026. But then again, we'll have to wait and see what happens in due time. So with that being said, the next thing they did show off, which appears to be a new update in regards to the forms of Gran Turismo 7, and that's what appears to be Spect 3 update, which I'm guessing they're trying to add in some unique features or something like that. So, yeah, I've got nothing else to say about this, I guess. So, and I believe we've only got 2 announcements left for that particular state of play. Next up we have is a new DualSense controller, which appears to be an inspiration of the forms of God of War. And the reason why is because, obviously though, for those of you who don't know, this year will mark the 20th anniversary of the game's release of the original God of War on the PlayStation 2. And yeah, because I can totally get the idea what this is going, especially because, you know, God of War was the most iconic thing for the PlayStation family of systems since PlayStation 2, PlayStation 3, and as well as PS4, and nowadays with PS5, so, and it will continue that tradition for the sake of the forms of other exclusive content when it comes to PSP in mind, such as, of course, one of those examples being Soul Calibur Broken Destiny, where it does manage to contain Kratos as, you know, a playable character in that game, and another one of those examples being Mortal Kombat 9, for not only for PlayStation 3, but in addition to PlayStation Vita as well, that it also includes Kratos as well from God of War, because, you know, he's the most aggressive type, you know, so. But anyway, and I suppose we now come to the final announcement in terms of the forms of state of play, and that's what it appears to be. There's going to be a brand new Insomniac Marvel game, and as a result, it is going to be the one and only Wolverine. And as a result, it does look pretty cool to me though, whenever I see that game in action, because the actual graphical style looks remarkably similar to not only Spider-Man, but in addition to Spider-Man Miles Morales, and in addition to that though, recently with Spider-Man 2. So as a result, yeah, it's actually pretty cool to see Wolverine finally gets his own game after God knows how long. So as a result, as I said earlier, it's going to be made by Insomniac. So yeah, that seems pretty cool. So, and as far as I'm aware, that game is going to be coming out at some point in next year, specifically sometime in fall in 2026. So because of that though, that'll be a huge selling point when it comes to PlayStation 5, and I suppose maybe PC in the near future. Well, I can't really tell for sure just yet. So anyway, and let's talk about the forms of the roadmap system, like I mentioned earlier, for the sake of the forms of that particular free DLC update complaints I somehow on about earlier. So, yeah, for instance though, Sonic Racing Cross Worlds has now officially posted up the post-launch roadmap, which as a result is going to be filled to the brim with not only DLC characters for the sake of Season Pass, but in addition to, well, free content drops. So as a result, I get the feeling that the first line of characters we can able to expect to get, which appears to be not only Steve, Alex, and Creeper, and also Hatsune Miku, Joker, and one of the characters from Yakuza series, and of course SpongeBob and Patrick with the Paddy Wagon, since the first SpongeBob movie, of course. So, and yeah, I believe those characters is going to be coming in during at some point on the 4th quarter in 2025. It could be either be in October, November, or December during that time. So, and then meanwhile, when it comes to Pac-Man and full ghosts like, you know, Pinky, Blinky, Inky, and Clyde. Obviously, though, they are going to be expected to be on 2026, and alongside with that, also same players with Mega Man and Proto Man with the Rush card. So, yeah. And on top of that, I get the feeling until by the end of the forms of 2026, we can able to actually expect to hear about the forms of not only Avatar Legends, but in addition to Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, Mutant Mayhem selections of playable characters, but either way, we'll have to wait and see what happens. So, in fact, I'm pretty sure for the fact that when it comes to 2025, we can only come across into either 3 or 4 free DLC characters we can able to expect to add it in, whilst the majority in 2026 we can able to expect to get 8 remaining ones, at least as far as I'm aware of anyway. So, yeah, because that's what I mean for able to try to explain to you all for something for the fact that we'll try to do Sonic Racing Cross Worlds Let's Play at some point in next year in 2026 because of DLC and stuff like that. So, but I digress. And, there's also another thing else I want to point out as well, is about the fact that, well, conveniently enough though, is that aside from the fact that I've already mentioned about this earlier, that I've already did manage to able to purchase the Season Pass DLC already, in regards to the forms of Sonic Racing Cross Worlds, but in addition to that, I've also recently did manage to purchase the DLC for Donkey Kong Bonanza, featuring not only DK Island, but in addition to Emerald Rush mode as well. And I somehow played it for a bit, and I'm gonna say, it's okay. I mean, it's not the best DLC in the world. I mean, it feels remarkably similar to the forms of Luigi's Bloom World from Super Mario Odyssey, but regardless of such though, it is a nice little distraction, I suppose, especially because despite the price tag is a massive complaint for most players out there, like seriously though, $20 for a DLC that has little amount of content, that's gonna be not enough. Although, I could imagine that the UK version we're able to expect to pay for about £17 for it, so, but either way, that's as far as I can try to say about this, I guess. Yeah, you get the idea. So, but anyway folks, that pretty much does it for every single Starries we somehow obtained, and as a result, we can able to actually expect to get ourselves the next figurine as far as I'm aware. So generally speaking, that was about the fact that we've now come towards the end game basically. Not just by the forms of the entirety of this Let's Play itself, but in addition to the entirety of the expansion for the Nintendo Switch 2 edition of Kirby and the Forgotten Land. So, and I'm not gonna lie to you, it's not as bad as I thought it was going to be, especially because of all that. Well, unlike something relates to one of the levels in one of those bridge sections in Winterhorn's kind of world, jeez, while looking back on it though, it does take me a couple of tries, easily the hardest when it comes to doing mission objectives in that particular stage. Although thankfully though, to me though, that is all thanks to the forms of the 60 frames per second thing, so as a result though, it makes everything else when it comes to completing missions a lot more easier this time around. Well, despite the fact I had to go for a lot of tedium involved with all that, you know, backtracking moments, and in addition to replaying the exact same stages constantly. Well, regardless of everything else though, is that thankfully though, when it comes to some stages in particular, it only took me 2 tries, and when it comes to some stages in particular, only took me for about 3 tries. So, overall, not too bad, not too shabby either. So because of that though, yeah, we somehow collected all 120 Starries, and as a result, we somehow got an additional figurine after collecting all of these Starries, basically. So as a result, we got ourselves the figurine for not only Kirby, but as well as Elfeline, and in addition to some Starries as well. So, yeah, that seems all, like, pretty nice, all things considered. So, and of course, like I said before, we've now getting close towards the end game, basically, which means there are more figurines to collect, and in addition to that, though, the final cup is about to upon us, so... But, yeah, and as far as for my final thoughts of that particular most recent, State of Play Direct, it was alright. I mean, I do really wish they were able to actually bring in some, cool and awesome announcements throughout. I mean, the obvious highlight is obviously Wolverine, obviously, and meanwhile, Mega Man and Proto Man are now joining in Sonic Racing Cross Worlds, which is really awesome in my book. Although, despite the fact that I believe the Season Pass DLC is going to cost about £25, specifically not only for Nintendo Switch, but in addition to PlayStation 4 and Xbox systems as well, so I will able to actually try to go after every single versions of that season pass. I know it's a little bit scummy these days when it comes to the price tag and everything, which gee, no wonder why that the base game is actually going to cost a lot more, especially because I get the horrible feeling for the fact that when it comes to economy these days, it's about to get super duper chaotic, so... But either way, so far so good in terms of getting some brand new figurines, even though despite the fact that I jinxed myself when it comes to saying new figurines, despite the fact that we will come across into duplicates every once in a while. But still, no matter what though, luckily there are still some rare stones to collect, despite the fact that I was expecting to try to get more of them, by trying to able to actually go back into, the Colosseum when it comes to some rewards or anything else like that. Well, regardless of everything else though, is about the fact that, well, then again, I'll talk more about that if we dive into tomorrow for the sake of the forms of the final day of September before we move on to October, which, yeah, no wonder why for the fact that, well, despite the fact it has been about 3 days ago since I actually have last played this game for sure, because recently though, during the informs within the previous weekend, that both Bugs Bunny and Lola Bunny have recently going to be going on to a replay let's play of the forms of My Little Pony Rainbow Runners, because obviously though, thankfully though, the commentary itself is a little bit better, and on top of all that stuff though, thankfully though, similar to the forms of how it does in Harmony Quest, obviously though, they try to set up the forms their custom music backgrounds, so just in case about the fact that the entire structure of that particular let's play itself won't be nearly as not as horrible as the forms of how it does it back in 2018, but it's just about the fact I'm still not a big fan of the generic music in the background. I think that's the only criticism I can probably think about anyway, so... And in addition to that though, also for what I've heard, for the fact that while looking back on it though, despite it's no longer there, that one of those YouTube notifications accidentally pops up in one of those particular uploads. I think I do remember that it appears to be LEGO The Incredibles when it comes to showing ourselves some DLC, or I should say, extra playable characters based off from any other Disney and Pixar properties. For likely, for instance though, with Toy Story all the way up to, let's say, Coco for instance, because obviously though, LEGO The Incredibles did originally came out in 2018, around the exact same year as the forms of Incredibles 2 did somehow first came out on a big screen, because, well, I can totally see why for the fact that that game did somehow exist, and no wonder why these days now, that Disney decided able to no longer bring in brand new video games for the time, which is very sad honestly, because I know for certain for one thing, for the fact that obviously though, that making games can take a very long time these days, although, still, fortunately though, when it comes to Kingdom Hearts 4, it's still going to be in development for PlayStation 5 possibly, as well as the forms of Xbox Series X, and especially noticeable with the forms of Nintendo Switch 2, I'm hoping anyway, assuming of course about the fact with the stupid game key cards is going to be the most infamous, so, but we shall wait and see. So, anyway, so before we end off the video right there, I just wanted to show you guys something. In this particular level right there, there's actually, kind of think about it, a mysterious secret room, which it does contain a Howl room. So as a result though, yeah, we do need to find that, until we're able to actually to grind for some more Starry coins, and as a result though, because again, in order able to get those extra figurines, we have to physically try to pay the insane amount of those Starry coins until we're able to actually access to more figurines for the time, so... But either way, so... And there's also the final thing I want to mention about, before you're able to actually to hunt down the forms of that Howl room, is that obviously, for those of you who don't know, for the fact that there's yet another Fire Emblem game has just recently came out, and straight to the point, is actually going to be the second mobile game has just been released, and that's what appears to be Fire Emblem Shadows, which I'm pretty sure the reason why that game is going to exist anyway on these smartphone devices is most likely because of that after the overwhelming financial success of Fire Emblem Heroes since 2017, so that's roughly 8 years ago, since when that game first came out on the smartphones, around the exact same time actually, as in, well, in terms of years wise, compared to the forms of how it does it on Animal Crossing Pocket Camp, for the smartphones as well. So I guess that makes it a little bit obvious about the fact that that game is actually going to be, well, it's going to be kind of like a combination of real-time strategy and social disjunction. I think it's what it says anyway. Well, I apologize for that particular dialogue once again, folks, but either way. And of course, just like the forms of how it does it in Fire Emblem Heroes, the game will be free to start when it comes to Fire Emblem Shadows, and unfortunately, though, microtransactions is going to be available, much like Fire Emblem Heroes. So, yeah, I wasn't too surprised there, to say the least, despite the fact I wasn't overly interested when it comes to Fire Emblem as much as I do. But regardless of such though, fortunately though, for the fact that there's also another thing else I want to classify for something about this as well, until 3 days time for the fact that Super Mario Galaxy, well, to be more specifically, Super Mario Galaxy 2 is going to be fastly approaching onto the glorious Nintendo Switch system. So hurrah! Despite the fact that most people still complain about the downgraded visuals, which, again, I'll get into more details about that if I played that particular version on my spare own time. But I was expecting to try to do a video dedicated to that, but relatively speaking, I was about the fact that I'm also able to talk over while playing the game at the same time, so just in case, trying to go for this process is a bit more self-explanatory for the most part. And there's also another thing too, for the fact that my most recent post, all about Fifi Le Feu, it still becomes a little bit more popular, which as a result, I'm generally surprised about, honestly, because I get the gut feeling for the fact that a lot of people out there seem to have a lot of crushed elements when it comes to, well, Fifi Le Feu as a character itself from the likes of Tiny Toon Adventures, because obviously though for the nostalgia reasons, and in addition to that though how adorable she is, which I honestly do agree. So as a result though, I get the feeling for the fact that, well, yes, it's actually doing pretty well. So anyway, so as you can see, we somehow come across into a secret path right there, and in order able to get up there is by utilizing the Spring Mouthful ability for Kirby, and as a result, once you reach in a specific section right there, then it actually contains nothing around here. Well, apart from the fact that we can able to actually keep on activating those particular crystals, and then once you're done with that, not only does it reveal the H right there, but in addition to that, there's also the L, and finally, most notably though, an A. So as a result, hello Hal, it's nice to meet you again. Since any forms of in the very first, I would say since the very first level of the forms of, well, I won't say necessarily the first level, but more specifically, it's hard for me to explain personally, because I haven't exactly replayed the Switch 1 levels for such a long time. Well, it's mainly because at this point in time, it's about the fact I always attempt able to play games for the sake of the forms of trying to complete it though, not necessarily trying to replay the game over and over again, but it's nice able to look back on several other aspects, you know? But anyway, so that's that. Okay, so I somehow made our way to the end of the level again, despite the fact I had to do this off screen, by the way, to do a bit of a jump cut right there, because there's absolutely no point able to actually show you guys the entire stage again. But regardless of such, that was about the fact that we've already seen that stage quite a long while as it stands, so, but either way. So yeah, for the most part though, we somehow only collected, let's just say, one brand new figurine out of that. Well, mind you though, about the fact that luckily those specific figurine capsules are basically on the exact same spots as the forms of how it does it since the first time around. So, at the very least though, is about the fact that if you really want to go after some more of one of those figurines in particular, you can either decide able to replay the exact same amount of stages again, or ultimately though, you can just try to able to grind as many of those story coins as you could, assuming of course what difficulty you did somehow choose. Like for instance though, I'm still basically on wild mode, because obviously though that way it allows me to able to actually grind as many of those story coins as I could. And then meanwhile when it comes to Spring Breeze mode, obviously though you get lesser amount of rewards compared to the forms of how it does it in wild mode basically. So because of that, so yeah, let me know in the comments down below for the question of the day. Are you guys excited about the fact that both Mega Man and Proto Man are now becoming playable characters in Sonic Racing Cross Worlds? Because honestly, I'm incredibly hyped about that, which, unlike the forms of how it does it in Mario Kart World, that despite the fact that that game still does not receive any of those DLCs in particular, unfortunately, due to the fact that, well, obviously that was about the fact that, after all, we've already got the most recent version updates, you know, with version 1.3.0, but aside from all that stuff, that was about the fact that, yeah, I just really wish that they were able to actually bring, some bunch of DLC for Mario Kart World. I mean, to be fair though, it is a bit of an early state, because obviously though, that game has already been out for 3 months or so, so I suppose we'll most have to wait for that until sometime in 2026, if possible. Well, because remember, back in Mario Kart 8 on the Wii U, that we didn't get DLC until specifically in November 2014, I think it was, so that's roughly about, I would say, 6 months after the game itself has been released, since in May 2014, specifically the 30th of May, so at least that's as far as I can try to remember that. So either way though, we shall wait and see what happens in due time though, especially considering about the fact that, after all though, we're nearly at the end of 2025 before we move on to 2026, so man, time flies, you know. So, yeah, as you can tell, I accidentally put the code that I somehow already redeemed at since in the base game on Switch 1. So, as you can tell, for the fact that we've already inserted one of those exclusive codes on Nintendo Switch 2 version, mind you, that way, not only we got ourselves a nice little delicious car mouthful cake, but also for the fact that we somehow got even more Starry coins. So yeah, that's actually very top notch, all things considered. Especially because, well, like I said before, we're now on to the final stretch in terms of the forms of this particular Let's Play itself, before we move on to the next Let's Play at some point on Wednesday for some time. So because of that though, well, you get the idea for that point. So because of that, yeah, it has been quite a while since we actually last decided able to be collecting some more rare stones, because obviously though, we were expecting to try to grind them off screen. Well, the only option is though, is about the fact that we have to replay for the Colosseum mode a couple of times in order to able to actually guarantee to get even more rare stones throughout. But that's just mainly because no matter what though, that I could imagine if I was trying to go back onto the challenge levels, that obviously though I was expecting to get even more rare stones, but that's not the case. So, oh well. No big deal though, but at the very least we somehow got a very cool figurine of both Meta Knight and King Dedede from earlier, so that's something. And of course we got another duplicate right there, so nothing too surprising throughout. So yeah, I could imagine about the fact that this particular process, it still feels a bit very lengthy sometimes. Well, regardless of such though, it's about the fact that we'll be back for Volume 2 of those figurines for EX variations, so although, relatively speaking, it was about the fact that we can able to expect to realize that we can meet up with this particular Waddle Dee right there to get ourselves the missing EX figurines as much as we could. So, well, at the moment right now, we've only got one of them at the moment, but hopefully we'll gather more of those rare stones at some point for either inserting those specific codes for one of those online exclusive functionalities, and in addition to that though, just trying to able to actually, well, hope for the best to try to get even more figurines to collect, because like I said before, there's now a whopping 342 figurines to collect. I mean, sometimes though, I just felt a bit mixed on it in regards to the forms of likely. Well, it's hard for me to explain personally. Oh, and by the way, the actual tilting motion control minigame thing is basically unchanged compared to the base game. Well, specifically it's the Switch 1 version most likely, so let's not worry about that right now. So for the time being though, let's go ahead and spend on not only power boosts, but in addition to speed boosts and the health up upgrade, so that way we can now able to participating on the final cup in the whole entire game, specifically the Switch 2 edition specifically. That's of course Ultimate Cup ZEX. So as far as I'm aware, I bet that particular cup is going to be a little bit more challenging compared to the forms of how it does in the original version of the Ultimate Cup Z, but there's actually going to be a catch to it though, which as a result though, yeah, we'll save that particular topic and during at some point until tomorrow, because I mean, let's face it though, September at the end of the day, when it comes to this year in particular for September, it's actually not too shabby for the most part. Even is especially noticeable considering for the fact that it's so awesome to play not only Sonic Racing Cross Worlds, but in addition to Pac-Man World 2 Repack. So as a result, well, mind you, I'm still in the actual process of able to actually playing through, specifically the PS4 version of Pac-Man World 2 Repack at the moment. And as a result though, for those of you probably wondering, it does have some additional content, by the way, which I'm probably not going to discuss upon it too much, because obviously though, it might actually bring us some spoiled elements, so as a result though, I'm probably not going to discuss upon it too much, whilst unlike something relates to Donkey Kong Bonanza, that like I said before, I found the DLC to be okay, but it's not the best DLC that Nintendo has ever made, by far, because relatively speaking though, unlike Mario Kart 8 Deluxe, that particular DLC is without a doubt the best, alongside with the Monster Fighters Pass in Super Smash Bros. Ultimate specifically, just because of a lot of fan services decided to come into play, when it comes to not only Banjo and Kazooie, but in addition to Sora from Kingdom Hearts, and still, it is so much more magical when it comes to likely trying to get hyped about those. Fighters is now going to be a thing in Super Smash Bros. Ultimate, so I mean, I could imagine about the fact that, imagine this, right? I don't know exactly for sure if the next Nintendo Direct, specifically though, focuses on Kirby Air Riders, was expected to also give us hype, so as a result though, we'll have to wait and see what happens. And I don't know if it's going to be a possibility for the fact that we might able to actually try to go ahead and say, let's just say yet another Nintendo Direct based off this time around though for the Super Mario Galaxy movie, but then again though, we'll have to wait and see what happens in due time, especially because if that's going to be the case, that'll be at the exact same time as when both Galaxy 1 and Galaxy 2 will be on Nintendo Switch, so that'll be a cool coincidence. So with that being said folks, is that we should probably end things off this point right here, so join me next time for more of Let's Play of Kirby and the Forgotten Land. Plus, Star-Crossed World is that this is going to be the absolute true finale of this game by going into the Ultimate Cup Z EX. So I'll see you guys until tomorrow. Later, fellas.